And good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome into another season's worth of Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews here on the DawgNation video channels. Our picks for the big games of the upcoming week. We're going to do this like we have all throughout the last few years. Really one of my favorite things to do during the week is make these picks and hear from our DawgNation team as they make theirs. Our buddy Dari Payrow from R.S. Andrews on board, and all of you who get a chance to make your picks here, there as well. We'll look at the 6 biggest games of the week, including the game involving the Georgia Bulldogs, and then when we are done, we will have a chance to also share some best bets with you, looking at kind of deeper down the board a little bit where there might be a chance at a little bit of value. We'll explain how our game works here in just a moment, but before we do any of that, I do want to take a moment to say a special hello to Dari Payrow from R.S. Andrews. Dari, we've been doing this now for a good number of years. Always, as I said, one of my favorite things to do. So let me personally welcome you back for another season here in 2023, and we are certainly glad to have you with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to return as the defending champ from last year. Complete domination from start to finish, week to week. I think I won probably almost every week. So looking to continue that, looking to continue another great year for the Dogs. I'm really fired up for this season. So, it's a long time waiting.
Yeah, you can look good, the red and black on there. And I would say as a show last year, we really didn't do too bad. So that was obviously, hopefully, a chance to make some money for those who tune in to watch us there as well. If you've never watched before, here's how it works. In a moment, we're going to introduce the games. We'll introduce the spreads. We're going to go through the DawgNation team, Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers. They'll have a chance to weigh in themselves. I'll share my thoughts on the game, and at that point in time, a consensus is formed. And we're going to ask Dari Payrow from R.S. Andrews at that point if he wants to go with the flow and join the consensus, or if he wants to go against that with his own pick. And at that point in time, we just sort of have some fun here and kind of talk about how these games play out from a point spread perspective. Of course, all of this brought to you by R.S. Andrews, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. R.S. Andrews is the one you can turn to and trust for all of that. You've been hearing me talk about them as one of our R.S. Andrews cool down on DawgNation Daily for a long time, and you know that when it comes to warm weather, and we've still got plenty of that left here as we move in towards the fall, getting that air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs, that's a really smart thing to do. Maybe some other fly-by-night companies told you need to replace your unit and get a brand new one. Well, eventually you may have to, but our friends at R.S. Andrews, they may be able to show you how you can get some new life out of your old unit. Get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find out more online, rsandrews.com. That is rsandrews.com. So glad to have R.S. Andrews. Glad to have all of you with us there as well. Our first game to talk about is Georgia against Tennessee Martin, being an FCS foe and not exactly the highest caliber FCS foe. You can imagine point spread's not particularly easy to come by when it comes to Georgia and Tennessee Martin, but the number we're going to use today is 44.5. So Mike Griffith starting us off as you always do. Give us your thoughts. The season opener for Georgia minus 44.5 as they host Tennessee Martin.
Well, first off, I'd remind Dari what Kirby Smart says about last year's championships. Doesn't mean anything about this year. So I'm glad you've got that head on the wall for 2022, but this is a new season. And, who knows? Maybe even Jeff Sintel might win some of the weeks this week. I can't wait to get to Jeff's picks today. I know he's going to be all over it. Tennessee Martin, Brand, is only 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 week 1 games. That's concerning to me. That tells me that maybe they're not going to cover this spread at Sanford Stadium. But then again, you look at Georgia, and they're a terrible home favorite against the spread. Only 3-6 against the spread in their last 9 games. But look, somebody's got to win against the spread. And I'm going to take the Dogs to cover because of the Mike Bobo factor. I don't know how good this offense is going to be ultimately, but I know that Georgia's going to want to make a statement earlier. I also know that when Brock Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton come into the game, it's not going to be the handoff. Kirby's going to want to see how these guys function, how they play, and how they throw the football. Now, you may make the argument that UT Martin outscored Tennessee last year in the second half at Neyland Stadium, but they were already down 52-7, Brandon. So I'm going to take I'm going to take Georgia, and I'm going to give 44.5 points to Tennessee Martin.
So Mike on the side of the Dogs as a big favor in Athens on Saturday, and we know this show has arrived now that Mike has also given us trend data. We talk about coming up in the world. We've really arrived here now. Jeff, to you, with Georgia looking at a 44.5 point number against Tennessee Martin for Saturday.
Yeah, fellas, I think this game is kind of going to feel like that R.S. Andrews commercial where Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo are sliding in quarterbacks, kind of like that filter look in that promo ad right there. Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, Brock Vandegrift. It reminds me of that Brett Hitman Hart line, the excellence of execution. I think Georgia's going to look fantastic. They're going to look simple. They're going to look quick. I think the Dogs will do everything they want to with UT, Martin. I think I can see a game where Georgia has more than 8 havoc plays, turnovers, interceptions. And my bonus pick is going to relate to this game as well. But give me the Dogs. I wouldn't be scared of this number if somebody tacked another touchdown on it.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Jeff's audio is in midseason form here right now. Maybe somebody behind the glass can reach out to Jeff and see if we can strengthen that signal from him there a bit. But I believe he gave us a pick of Georgia minus the 44.5. So a lot of love for the Dogs as a favorite. Connor, that puts the ball in your court next. Do you want to join our scribes here and take Georgia minus an albeit made up, but nonetheless gigantic number here at 44.5 points?
No, I can't join Jeff at the bottom of whatever ocean or body of water he is currently broadcasting from. Look, Georgia didn't cover against Samford last year, an FCS foe, when they came in here. And look, Mike's got his trend data. I've got mine as well. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be the only one here to pick UT Martin to cover the 44.5 point spread. Look, I'll be the bad guy and I'll wear that hat. And last year, in the opener, I'm pretty sure I was the only one to expect Oregon to keep it close. Didn't happen. Year before, I was the only one to pick Clemson to beat Georgia. Didn't happen. Big wins for Georgia in week 1 in the past. So I'll take UT Martin here. I don't feel great about it, but I think there's going to be a running clock in the second half. And while Mike, I think, does make a good point, and when we see Brock Vandegrift, when we see Gunnar Stockton in this game, they're going to be throwing the ball. I wonder how much, Georgia gets up big and sort of gets on to the next week. And the factor of a running clock in the fourth quarter, maybe even a shortened fourth quarter altogether, I think is certainly something to keep in mind here.
Well, DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers, they certainly disagree with Connor on this. 96% like Georgia to cover the 44.5 against Tennessee Martin. Perhaps no surprise there. I think it's also important to note that we have a tendency to lump all of these, what we kind of call bye games or the lesser opponent games, into one category. The truth is there are actually lots of degrees of difference between the various Group of 5 or FCS teams that Georgia plays. With all due respect to the Skyhawks of Tennessee Martin, this is a pretty lowly team to be playing Georgia. They were just 7-4 in the FCS a year ago. They were not an FCS playoff team. So, this isn't even exactly one of the better FCS teams coming into Athens on Saturday. But it's also important to keep in mind a couple of things as it relates to Georgia. First of all, here's a phrase you'll hear me use a lot, and you probably heard me say this before. High point spread games are also high variance games. In other words, once you start about very, very big numbers, it becomes very difficult to predict how that ball might bounce late on the back end of such a large spread. And while Georgia, for those who don't follow gambling very closely, certainly understand how dominant UGA has been, 15-0 last year, the truth is they were only 8-7 against the spread last year, which is about normal. That's about where a team that like Georgia that's watched so closely, that's about where it should be. Connor mentioned the Oregon game from last year. If Georgia was playing Oregon on Saturday, my assumption is they would win by 44 points. Playing against, because they obviously did a year ago, playing against Tennessee Martin, I'm just not quite so sure that version of UGA shows up. I don't love this game either way. My advice would be never bet a spread this high for it or against it either way. But for the purposes of our pick, I think I've got to take Tennessee Martin plus the 44.5 out of principle alone. This is easy. It's obviously not close. Georgia wins in dominant fashion, but I ain't betting them to cover a 44.5 point number against such an undistinguished opponent. So I'll take the Redhawks plus the Skyhawks, I should say. I'll take the Skyhawks plus the points here. Dari, that puts the ball in your court. Do you want to go with the flow and take Georgia minus 44.5 points?
Let me get my tasty beverage here.
Week 1, already pulling out the beverage.
Oh, so back-to-back titles. You got to kick off the year. Got to keep it going. We're looking for that three-peat. I think this game is, as much as no disrespect to UT Martin, I think this is more like a scrimmage for Kirby to get game tape on guys at the second level. He's talked about this in practice and through the summer that, linebackers a little thin, up front could be a little thin in the second tier. The talent's there. They just don't have the game reps. So I think over this first 4 games, Kirby's really going to try to get a lot of guys game experience. So as the season rolls along, they have tape, they can get better, and they're better prepared for later in the season. with that being said, I think, Georgia's going to control this game. I just don't see Georgia really blowing it way out of proportional. And even if they do, I think they're going to have the defense side with a lot of younger guys getting reps. So I like UT Martin and the points here.
Yeah, 44.5 is just a lot of points to be sure. And with that, we are off and running with Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews here this week. We turn our attention next to a game that by the time you see this show on Friday will have already been played. But for the purposes of our fun competition and just for some context here, we wanted to pick what I think is arguably the most fun game of the entire week. That is Florida traveling all the way out west, Salt Lake City, to take on the Utah Utes. It's a Thursday night game. As I said before, that game will have already happened by the time this show takes place. But the backdrop here is fascinating. A year ago in Gainesville, Florida got the win against Utah 29-26, but the last time the Gators were on a football field, they were also out west, getting embarrassed by a Pac-12 team 30-3 at the hands of Oregon State in the Las Vegas Bowl. Of course, for Utah, the big story is the unknown status of Cam Rising. Not the only quarterback injury the Utes are dealing with right now, but it's the rising status, ironically enough, that's caused the spread to fall. At one point in time in the summer, you could have seen Utah 10, 11-point favorite. They were about a touchdown favorite to begin the week. We're going to do this game, though, at Utah -4. Our graphic says 7. We're going to do Utah -4 on this because that's where our line reflection is here right now. So with the number at 4, let me ask you, Mike Griffith, how do you like this game? Utah right now, because of quarterback injuries, on just a 4-point favorite against Florida in a game to be played on Thursday night.
Yeah, really challenging, Brandon, when we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And, as you said, the game will have already been played when people see this. So, all I can go on is that Billy Napier and the Gators did make it to Dallas. They left early. There was a unique travel plan. I think that playing at 4,637 feet at Rice-Eccles Stadium is ultimately going to be the difference. I think Florida was thin on the defensive line last year. I think that Utah is a good program, not a great program. I also think that Florida had a first-round NFL quarterback last year when they won this game, and I think Anthony Richardson made Florida better than they actually were. So all those things said, a lot of unknowns. I'm going to go with Utah. I'm going to go with the home team just because of that home field advantage and so many questions about Florida to answer this year, particularly at quarterback with Anthony Richardson now off to the NFL. So I'm going to take Utah to win and cover against the Florida Gators.
So, Mike, on the side of the home team out of the Pac-12 right there, Jeff Sintel, how about for you? Utah hosting Florida, Utes a 4-point favorite. Which direction you want to go with this?
Yeah, guys, hopefully
Almost was going to be better. Now we can't hear him at all. So, Jeff, we will come back to you here in a moment. We're going to let Connor make his pick, then we'll come back to you. You sounded great, and then we lost you completely. And that's about par for the course. So, Connor, to you, with Utah as a 4-point favorite, where do you want to go with this game to be played on Thursday night?
Yeah, Jeff coming out not executing week 1. I think you're going to see something a little similar here with Utah. I got this game in real life at 6.5 earlier this week. I'll obviously like that line a heck of a lot more than -4 where we're picking it at right now. I think this is a Florida team. Well, yes, going from Anthony Richardson to Graham Mertz is certainly a downgrade there. I think this Florida team is going to be better on the lines of scrimmage on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. They brought in some good transfers on the defensive line there to help them out. They've got 2 studs at running back, and I think they're going to try and shorten this game up, increase the chance of an upset there. And look, if they're playing this game in week 8, week 9, I think Utah is a lot better. But the reality is a week 1 game. Florida's had all offseason to prepare for this. I like Florida at +4. I kind of maybe like you could talk me into them on the money line if you're really interested in making some money this week. Because if you think they're going to cover a 4, it's pretty feasible that maybe they find a way to win the game. So give me Florida +4 here. I think they find a way to keep it close. I don't think this is a Utah team that to start the season is going to be in a position to blow a team out, certainly with Cam Rising not 100% and maybe not even playing in this game at all. I think that's certainly a factor there. And so give me Florida, who knows what it is and knows what it wants to do, at +4.
So I think Connor's bringing up a really good point that our audience should consider. Too late to make any kind of move on this game. But games like this, when you look around right now at various sports books, you see a pretty wide range in spreads out there. Now, I don't think we're getting close to 3 from anybody. I'm talking about actually hitting 3, nor do I think we're getting back to a touchdown again. But in between that, you get the 3.5s, you get the 4.5s. You got various spreads that are kind of out there. So depending on which side you like, you want to try to find the best number. Given some of the wide, kind of vigorous prices that are out there right now, if you're not line shopping, you're just going to have a hard time coming close to winning over the course of a full season. So what Connor's bringing up there matters. When you got the game, where you're picking the game, depending on the spread you want to get. Give yourself the best chance here. Open a lot of accounts, shop around, give yourself a chance there on that. Jeff, we'll come back to you. How about Utah -4? Where you want to go with this?
Yeah, guys, how's that? Is that better?
Sounds awesome, Jeff. Yeah, sounds wonderful.
I said hopefully the East Coast elite audio media types will allow me to get my thoughts in here. I just don't think Florida's going to have a great season, guys. I think this is going to be the first part in a poison pill for their program. I think they're a little bit better, but I don't think they're good enough to go into Utah. Pretty hard place to play and win. I think they're going to have trouble moving the ball this season. And I like the points. I lay the Utah on the points and give me the Utes to roll in this one. And to make a lot of Dog fans really happy. Even happier than Brandon is to hear crystal clear audio right now.
Yeah, there you go. So we've got a couple on the side of Utah right there. Had one on the side of the Gators plus the points. DawgNation daily listeners and viewers, no real surprise here. 91% going against Florida here on this. They typically do because they understand that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. Lousy, stinking Gators. Never a strong pick for our audience. And to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this just for a moment, I think it's fascinating how much attention Rising's potential injury does get. And I think a lot of this sort of speaks to a very betting-hungry audience kind of looking to fire on something here week 1 and overreacting in a way to a quarterback injury that I believe if it's week 5, week 6, week 7, week 8, I don't think Cam Rising's injury, with all due respect, is moving the spread nearly as much later in the season as it happens to be doing right now. Now, some of this is also related to the fact that Kyle Whittingham, the Utah coach, is notorious for keeping it very secretive. Some would say too secretive when it comes to quarterback injuries. There was an embarrassing chapter for Utah a year ago, at least from the perspective of the TV side, where the FS1 TV booth was not made aware of a Cam Rising injury a year ago. So Whittingham already has a little bit of a notorious reputation when it comes to handling quarterback injuries. But let me just do this really quickly. When you look at Utah, if you care about things like ESPN FPI, they're actually a preseason number 12 there. Florida's a preseason number 25. So a quarterback injury alone is not enough to level the playing field between these two teams. And if you think about a 4-point spread, that's basically what the line would tell you, giving the 3 points to Utah for a home field advantage. Not quite the same thing. Now, the other quarterback injury here is Brandon Rose. It's a 3-star redshirt freshman, did not play a year ago, who would have been the backup. He is definitely injured and out. But the so-called walk-on third string who will start if Rising can't play, this is a guy named Bryson Barnes. He hasn't played a ton, but he did play some a year ago. 37 to 57, 4 touchdowns, 2 picks, 7.4 yards per attempt. They're going to play a guy named Nate Johnson, a little bit of a wildcat quarterback here too. Look, I'm not telling you that's a guy that's going to win the Davey O'Brien or something like that, but it's also not incompetent quarterback play either. And a quarterback playing at that level against Florida, for Utah playing at home, I think it's good enough to win the game. And I frankly don't think this game's anywhere near as close as the narrowing spread would lead you to believe it is. I like Utah a lot here, and I think the Rising injury has been completely overinflated, and that remains true for me whether he plays or not. So, Dari, the flow on the side of Utah. You want to go with the flow and take the Utes?
Yeah, I don't think I could do that. I mean, even though this has a revenge game written all over it, and Utah's a much better team at home, they always play better in that environment. And they also do well in all the big games that they have there. They usually come out with a W. But what they've not done well in those big games, they haven't covered. In a lot of those big games, they may have won the game, but they usually don't cover those type of games. So I like Florida to cover this number, but I think Utah will squeak out with a win.
So there you go. Big pick on the big game there on Thursday night. We'll turn our attention now to games being taking place on Saturday, and that's a Power 5 matchup in the SEC as Tennessee plays host to the University of Virginia. This is also a line which is going to kind of bounce around either just above or just below that 28-point number, obviously a key number. We're going to pick it at 28.5, but y'all be careful depending on which side you want to be on here. Mike, how about the Tennessee Vols minus 28.5 against Virginia. Where you want to go on that?
Well, I think this is really more about Virginia and Tony Elliott and where they're at. They lost their last 3 games that they played last year, and then of course the last 2 were canceled. I think they only beat one FBS level team last year, and that was Georgia Tech. I don't know if that counts, but I like Tennessee to win and cover. It's in Nashville. It's essentially an opportunity for Tennessee to play in front of a lot of recruits in that mid-Tennessee area. Tennessee 6-2 against the spread in their last 8 games on Saturdays. Finished last year strong. They're going to want to make a statement. And Josh Heupel doesn't mind running the score up and padding the stats. And so I'm going to take Tennessee and give 28.5 points to Virginia.
So, Mike, on the side of the favorite there. Jeff, how about for you? Number we're going with here, 28.5 for Tennessee, the not debut for Joe Milton, but his kind of re-debut is what we expect to be a full season starting at quarterback there for the Vols. 28.5 is the number. What do you think about it?
Not scared by it. I know a lot of reasonable people get some consternation looking at that 28, 28.5, 27. Tennessee's just a much better football team. I think they want to set a lot of momentum for this year. I think Tennessee is going to get a lot of mileage out of the 23, 24, 25-year-old quarterback. I think Joe Milton will have a great year, especially in that kind of carnival fun offense. The big thing I'm going to look for out of this game is to listen to the announcers overdo Squirrel White with a touchdown. I think that's probably one of the impact players for Tennessee this year. Folks remember that Georgia used to go after him heavy. I think he had about 30, 40 catches last year for about 400 yards. I think he's going to have a bonker season this year, Squirrel White. I'm not scared of the number at all. I'm going to lay it. Give me the Vols to have a lot of fun in Music City this weekend.
With all due respect to Squirrel White, the Tennessee wide receiver on this program and on all DawgNation programs, there's only one squirrel that matters. That's Eddie the Blind Squirrel. So Squirrel White, stay in your lane there because Eddie the Blind Squirrel is still reigning on top of the Squirrel Kingdom here. So just keep that in mind. Connor, just laying wood like always with our sports writers here, minus the 28.5. Everybody jumping on Tennessee here for the moment. You want to join in on that big number for the Vols?
Unfortunately, I do, and it has nothing to do with Tennessee. I think it has everything to do with how bad Virginia is. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the Power 5, and I know you've got some points to make on this as well, BA, so I won't step on it too much. But if you remember this coaching hire at Tennessee, Tony Elliott was a guy that it's been reported he was offered the job, and he was Clemson's offensive coordinator at the time. And he said no to that. I think maybe there might be a little people on the Tennessee side that want to see Tennessee run that up a little bit, thinking, oh, you're too good to come coach at Tennessee. And obviously Tennessee was a very different situation at that point in time with the fallout from the Jeremy Pruitt era. But I think there's going to be some motivation there from the Tennessee side to run things up. I like this line a lot more at 28 or even 27.5 if you can find it out there. But 28.5, I still think Tennessee is going to roll on Saturday. DawgNation
daily listeners and viewers also agree there too. 74% on the side of Tennessee, covering the very big number. And I'll keep my point on this simple because a lot of these points have kind of already been made. I do believe, unfortunately for Virginia, and listen, a lot of this kind of comes because of a horrible circumstance on their campus, but I believe Virginia, from a football standpoint, is probably the worst team in the Power 5. They are certainly among the very worst, which I think shows up in this particular game. And Connor touched on this. This is one of those weird things that has kind of been kind of a sneaky, quiet controversy this offseason. You have to be kind of a college football dork to care about this, but there has been a little bit going on between Tony Elliott, the Virginia coach, and Tennessee, where Elliott himself has said twice that he was offered the Tennessee job. That has been disputed by Vols athletic director Danny White. And the first time, according to White, and he put this on Twitter, I guess it's called X now, but he put this out on social media a couple of weeks ago, that the first time that Elliott said he got the Tennessee job, he let it go and he didn't say anything. But once Elliott said it again, according to Danny White, the Tennessee AD, he felt the need to rebut it at that point in time. So I do believe the Tennessee folks, no matter what the actual truth is, I do believe the Tennessee folks don't like the fact that Elliott's been going around saying, hey, they offered me the Tennessee job and I said no. In a game in which, the Cavaliers probably don't quite have the horses to keep up with Tennessee as it is, extra touchdown certainly doesn't hurt, and it would not surprise me in the kind of reintroduction of Joe Milton as a quarterback for the Vols here this year. If that extra touchdown gets scored, it's a gigantic number. It's the squarest play of all time, especially when the entire panel is a clean sweep on it. But I actually do like Tennessee minus the 28.5 here. And Dari, I kind of like them a pretty good bit. Scares me to think that, but I do. You want to go with the flow and join the entire panel, audience included, on the side of Tennessee minus 28.5?
No, I can't do that. I mean, I like Virginia in this game and the points. When you look at this, it has the makings of Captain Obvious, right? Virginia is the 126th ranked offense last year. They can't do anything. They're going against a highly rated offense right now with lots of weapons, playing at home with their home opener. They're fired up after last year. They got Joe Milton. We saw what he did in a bowl game. It doesn't matter. This is the type of game that's going to be 42-17. And Virginia is going to get a backdoor cover late in this game. Tennessee's going to run it comfortably throughout the whole game, but 28 and a hook is just too much. I like UVA in the points.
So we are got a nice little flow going here right now. A lot of big picks for the games come up for the upcoming weekend. Let's keep it going with a game that I don't think has gotten enough attention. A week one slate that's probably not as deep as sometimes it's been in the past, but a Saturday game in Charlotte that I think is a lot of fun is UNC against South Carolina. These two teams have played before. They've actually played in Charlotte before there as well. Obviously for North Carolina, we know the story. Drake May, a quarterback who has said that he was offered seven-figure plus money to transfer to the SEC, chose to stay at UNC, but the Tar Heels defense that he keeps up with his teammates there, not exactly stopping very many folks. Big problem for North Carolina a year ago. On the South Carolina side of things, Spencer Rattler is back at quarterback. A really phenomenal conclusion to the regular season. Wins against Tennessee, wins against Clemson, but they do find themselves a 2.5-point dog in Charlotte to North Carolina coming up there on Saturday. So, Mike, neutral site game, South Carolina against North Carolina. Tar Heels favored by 2.5 points. Where do you want to go with this one?
Yeah, Brandon, one of the offseason transactions was Freddie Kitchens leaving South Carolina and going to North Carolina. And, there's a reason why Freddie was a head coach in the NFL. I know it didn't work out with the Browns, even though him and, Monken were together and got sideways. Imagine that. Todd Monken, hard to get along with. But I do think Freddie Kitchens is the winning edge for North Carolina with his knowledge of the South Carolina personnel and his knowledge of offense. And now he is hooked up with one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the nation in Drake May. So give me North Carolina and give the Gamecocks the points.
So Mike on the side of UNC, minus 2.5 points right there. Jeff, how about for you? South Carolina, an opponent for Georgia, by the way, in a couple of weeks. North Carolina out of the ACC, Tar Heels favored 2.5.
Yeah, I'm going to lay the points. I like South Carolina in this one. Rare battle of 5-star quarterbacks. Rattler 2019. And then you've got Drake May 2021. Kind of a good marquee matchup. You see why the ESPN crew is going there. I like a new freshman for South Carolina to make a big difference, and that is Nichols Harbor. I think they're starting to call him Nick. I think I'm pretty high on South Carolina's program this year. I like the way they're being built. I think South Carolina is everything that Florida fans were thinking they were building with Billy Napier. That's why I think they'll get a big early season debut win. I know South Carolina's getting 2.5, but I like them to win this game outright.
Oh, there you go. Jeff on the side of South Carolina. So split decision right now, Connor, between our two sports writers there. You want to step in here and break the tie for us?
Yeah, I do. I like South Carolina this week. I have South Carolina on the money line. I think this is a program that is, again, trending in the right direction. And while I love Drake May and what this team's going to be able to do, North Carolina does have a new offensive coordinator with Phil Longo becoming the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin. And I can't remember the last time North Carolina fielded a competent defense, much less even an average one. And so I think South Carolina put up some points late last year. And while, yes, they themselves have a new offensive coordinator, I think South Carolina is going to find a way to win this game. They beat North Carolina in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, I believe, 2 years ago. So I think they're going to be motivated. I think they're going to want to go out and show that, hey, we're continuing to take steps in the right direction. And those wins over Tennessee and Clemson and last season were not flukes.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. 61%, by the way, DawgNation daily listeners and viewers also on the side of South Carolina here there too. So not a huge imbalance in favor of the Gamecocks, but a little bit of SEC love to be shown there. South Carolina just 7-6 against the spread last year, so not a massive point spread advantage for them necessarily. But those two big wins at the end of last season, Tennessee, Clemson, especially the Clemson game, hard not to get that out of your head in a situation like this. I believe through 2 years, Shane Beamer's actually been one of the more underrated coaches in college football, providing signature wins, providing a turnaround. Really, a lot of the things that Josh Heupel has gotten credit for, Shane Beamer has done, I believe, just as much, if not more of. Now, the market's pretty low on South Carolina overall. Their season win total sits only about 5.5 right now. So there's not a huge level of expectation for the Gamecocks, but I am higher on South Carolina than the market is, I would say, typically speaking. So I like South Carolina. I believe they win the game outright here, but certainly for the purpose of our contest, plus the 2.5, once again, this is a fairly easy pick for me. And if I'm wrong, I am dead wrong because I like them a lot. Dari, with that in mind, you want to go with the flow and take South Carolina.
I do. I like the Gamecocks. It should be a fun game between May and Rattler battling it, but I think South Carolina's defense gives them the edge in this game. I just trust that a lot more than anything North Carolina is going to have on defense. So I think late in the game, South Carolina is going to make some plays, and they're going to get a little separation, and they're going to win this outright. So I like them in a money line situation here.
Now, for what is not only the best game, arguably, of week one, it's maybe one of the best non-conference games of the entire season. Let's go to Orlando on Sunday. Obviously, prayers for those down there in north and central part of Florida as they deal with some potential bad weather, of course. But Florida State LSU, a rematch of a game played a year ago in New Orleans that was won in kind of sloppy fashion by Florida State. Both these teams probably a little bit more buttoned up a year later than they were back then. But nonetheless, you're looking at a tremendous game here, playoff aspirations on both these sides. For Florida State, they're a 2.5-point underdog playing in their own state against LSU. So with that in mind, Mike, will go to you. LSU giving 2.5 to Florida State. What direction you want to go with this fun one to be played on Sunday, by the way?
Yeah, this is a tough one, Brandon. This is one I wouldn't bet if we didn't have to make selections on the show, because it's a real coin toss to me. I mean, Florida State, a team with a lot of momentum, brings back a lot of experience. LSU missing Mason Smith, missing John Emery. I guess I'm just tossing a coin up. I'm going to go with Florida State and give 2.5 points to LSU. I don't feel real good about it because I think LSU is the more talented team, and I think Brian Kelly's a great coach. But I don't know, just a hunch. That's all it is, just a hunch. I'm probably going to be the only one to pick Florida State, unless Jeff follows my lead. I know Connor will go against me on it.
Well, there you go. So Mike on the side of Florida State, or Mike's coin, I should say, on the side of Florida State there. Jeff, how about for you? 2.5 points Florida State is getting in this spot in Orlando on Sunday. Where you want to go with it?
Wow, I love it how our program always gets these little rubbing is racing type moments, and everybody gets some backdoor digs into one another. I like Florida State a lot. I think this is a reap the rewards type year for them. I know they got a lot of NIL money to raise. They got to have good stuff on the field to do that. I think the Mason Smith suspension is a big deal here. And I also just like Florida State's team. They've got a lot of pieces, especially some impact receivers, but they got decent players. I mean, they're making out the Florida State quarterback to be a true, legitimate downtown athletic club guy, a Heisman finalist. I think Florida State is starving for momentum. I think they get it against an SEC opponent. And I do see this as being one of the better games, not only the weekend, the month, but perhaps. I know that they are getting 2.5. I like FSU to win this game outright. I think they win this game by about 6 or 7 points.
Oh, wow. So a lot of love for Florida State here right now. Connor, what do you want to do with what I think is just unquestionably an incredibly fun game?
Yeah, one, Jeff, they don't do the Heisman Trophy ceremony at the Downtown Athletic Club anymore. They do it at the Dolby Theater. 2, I have never in my life heard more praise and more talk about a guy that played, and I'm not making this up, 8 total snaps the year before in Mason Smith. I get he's a phenomenal, talent, 5-star recruit, did some nice things as a freshman. This guy, a defensive lineman, coming off an ACL injury where they're expecting him to play major snaps. Those two things usually don't mesh very well there. And having said all that, I still like LSU in this game. For the biggest reason, Brian Kelly is a significantly better head coach, in my opinion, than Mike Norvell. For as much as we talk about at Florida State and how well they've done in the portal and bringing Jared Verse back last year, that team lost games that, quite frankly, they should not have lost. NC State particularly jumps to mind there. And so with that in mind, I think this is an LSU team that they're going to be hungry to go out there and prove it. I have LSU minus 2.5 in this game in real life. So give me the Tigers here. I know no John Emery Jr. He's missed a ton of games for LSU before. They're not worried about playing without him. And so I like LSU here, even though no Mason Smith, even though no John Emery Jr. on Sunday night.
So 53% of DawgNation daily listeners and viewers agree with Connor. Pretty close divide here on this, what's expected to be a very good game, but a little bit of love on the side of LSU. And I think sometimes it's important to pay attention to the dog that isn't barking. And when Mason Smith was suspended for this game, the one thing I don't think you've noticed a ton of is a ton of outrage on the part of the LSU side here, which tells me a couple of things. A, the most important thing, I don't think Mason Smith's 100% healthy right now anyway. I believe that Smith's a factor for LSU, but I believe it happens later in the year. I don't think they think he would have been 100% had he played in this game anyway, I don't believe. I think it also speaks to an overall level of confidence that LSU has here. No big secret, I've picked LSU to make the college football playoff. I believe they have two quarterbacks better than anything on Alabama's roster. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But in this game against Florida State, the number one factor here is, go to Bud Elliott, a guy who writes for 24/7 Sports, who does the blue chip ratio. Even when you factor in Florida State's transfers, you're still talking about a ratio of former 4- and 5-star players for LSU that's at 71%. For Florida State, that's just 41%. Florida State's a good team. Last year, by the power rating standpoint, by the end of the year, they were probably playing at kind of a top 5 level. But there is a big talent imbalance in place between LSU and Florida State. Oh, yeah, by the way, LSU brought in 14 transfers of their own, 10 of those on defense. It's an upgraded defense. It is potentially a two-headed monster at quarterback, but plenty of Jaden Daniels on Sunday. I like LSU here, not just to win this game, but to make the college football playoff. I think they're significantly better than Florida State. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take the Fighting Tigers in Orlando?
That's game of the week here. You know, LSU has all the hype this year. They're the SEC favorite. They're going to win their side. They're going to go in the playoffs, a national darling, title aspirations. But FSU hasn't been this stacked with talent in a long, long time. And my FSU insider tells me their wide receivers gonna eat all day long against that LSU secondary. I like Seminoles to roll in this game. They're playing in Florida. I expect the crowd to be FSU heavy, extremely loud. Take the Seminoles with confidence.
Good pick there from Dari Payrow. Strong evidence to support that, including talking to his FSU insider. So you love that. One more game from the official slate before we get to our best bet picks. That takes us to Monday night home game for Duke. Wallace Wade Stadium welcomes in the Clemson Tigers on the Labor Day night action. We get extended weekend for football here coming up. And in this particular spot, Mike Elko's Duke team finds itself a 12.5-point home underdog to the Clemson Tigers. And by the way, the debut of Garrett Riley as the brand new Tigers offensive coordinator. Key storyline to matter here. Mike, let's go to you. Clemson's a 12.5-point favorite on the road in the ACC. Where do you want to go with this?
Well, Brandon, the fact that you picked this game tips me off that you must like Duke, because it sure does seem obvious to me that Clemson should win this game. But you must have some metric. Otherwise, we'd be picking Texas and Oklahoma game and taking advantage of the opportunity to talk about JT Daniels and Rice against Texas. But we went with this game, 70 miles from Athens, with Clemson. That's how far they are. There's more to the story. I wish I didn't go first this time because I know you've got some details of why this game's on our picks list. I guess I'm gonna be the sucker. I'll take Clemson and lay the points. There's got to be some reason behind this pick being on our board. But I'm going to go with Clemson. I'm going to go with the obvious. I'm going to be the master of the obvious and take Clemson to give less than 2 touchdowns against Duke.
So admittedly, I did wrestle with that 6th pick a little bit. I didn't see necessarily a better candidate for the game. I feel like a little bit of insight on it, but hopefully I would have found some insight on whatever the game that we're picking is. So I can't pretend this is a part of a grand conspiracy, although I will also admit that it was a little bit hard for me to figure out what the 6th game was supposed to be, which I think speaks to week 1 slate, probably not quite as deep as we're used to there in the past. But nonetheless, Mike, a very paranoid pick of Clemson there for his first selection. Jeff, how about you? Where the number rests at 12.5 for the Tigers on the road.
Wow, Mike sounds more worried there than I do about my audio every time I unmute this thing. I think what's obvious here is that this line is only 12 points. And to me, that says mighty Clemson has fallen. And I don't really understand the rationale why, especially in a game in a matchup here with Duke. This is not a comparison of SAT or ACT scores here. I'm a huge Cade Klubnik fan. I think Clemson can rightfully boast they've got two of the better pairs of linebackers in the country. They still got some talent on the offensive side of the ball in the backfield. They got a good stable of running backs. I think the new coordinator is going to help. I think I'm going to roll it back to 2014 and 2015 here in Dabo World, when Dabo World was still Disney World for Clemson fans, and lay the points. I think Clemson's going to eat this weekend.
So, Jeff, on the side of the favorite there, and a lot of love here for Clemson on a Monday night. Connor, how you want to go on this one?
Yeah, one, I think if Jeff worried as much as Mike did, maybe Jeff would have better audio there. And so, look, I have Clemson as a playoff team, and I do see a world where they win this game by 2 touchdowns, but I'm not a sucker here. Duke won 9 games last year, and I know BA is going to talk more about this guy. Mike Elko is a really good defensive coach, and if you look at some of the struggles that A&M has had since he's left, I think that's a pretty big reason for that. I'm also going to give you a name here to file away. Riley Leonard is a guy that you're going to hear a lot come NFL draft season. He's the quarterback for Duke. They're going to be able to do some things. This Clemson defense, which underachieved last year in their first year with a new defensive coordinator, with Brent Venables obviously moving on. You lose Brian Brzee. You lose Trent Simpson. Now, yes, you do have Barrett Carter and you do have Jeremiah Trotter, maybe one of, if not the best linebacker duo in the country. I like Duke here plus 12.5, even though I expect Clemson to win this game and ultimately find its way into the college football playoff. Going to that atmosphere on a Monday night, Wallace-Wade Stadium, this is not going to be an easy game for Clemson. And this is not how I think Clemson would want to open up with a new offensive coordinator in Garrett Riley.
88% of DawgNation daily listeners and viewers, they disagree, but I totally agree. Look, here's my thought process and stuff like this. When you see a team favor double-digit points on the road, you have to ask yourself a question. Do I have a good reason to take them with such a big number? Now, potentially the debut of Garrett Riley would be a good reason, because I do think this is going to be a dramatically upgraded Clemson offense here this year. But as Connor touched on it, though, Mike Elko had a phenomenal rookie season as a head coach for Duke a year ago. Not only did they win 9 games, they're actually 9-4 against the spread. But get this, here's the number that blows you out of the park. They covered games last year by an average of 8.7 points per game. They were way better than the market each week. Now, some of that's been factored into the spread because, honestly, a typical Clemson-Duke game, even on the road for Clemson, would typically be a larger spread than this. So some of the love for Elko is baked into this spread. But when you look at what he has done relative to expectations in his first year in there in Duke, this was a sterling debut campaign for him. And it's enough to get me. Maybe this is partially wishful thinking because it'd be fun to be entertained on a Monday night. But that's enough to get me on the side of Duke here, plus the 12.5. A little closer game than Clemson wants and the experts expect on a Labor Day night. But I'll take Duke here in this spot. Nonetheless, though, Dari, the flow is on the side of Clemson. You want to go with the flow and take Dabo.
Clemson. I'm going to take Clemson here. No real feel for it. It's week 1. It's early. We don't know what kind of Clemson team you're going to get these days. Klubnik showed a little bit last year that he can be a little gunslinger. I think in the offseason, he's got time to clean some stuff up. I just trust Clemson's defense more in this game, probably to get more stops than Duke's defense will. So since the defense, I think they'll deliver a cover.
Another reminder, that's Dari Payrow from R.S. Andrews. And, of course, R.S. Andrews brings the show to you each and every week. And if you got a lot of folks coming over to watch football this weekend, the last thing you want is for your weekend to be ruined because a water heater goes out or something like that. So don't forget, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace your water heater the same day. So make sure you reach out to our friends at R.S. Andrews. Let them take good care of you for all your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Find them online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. So these 6 games that we pick officially, those are the games that will count towards our standings. They are in the books, and now the board is available to anyone and anything. Over, under, spread bets, money line, whatever you want to do here with the games that are left over, your best picks for the upcoming weekend. Mike, we'll go back to you here. You got any best bets from the rest of the board for us right now?
Well, I do think JT Daniels will throw for more than 300 yards against Texas, but I'm not sure that they'll have a good enough defense to stop Texas. So I'm not touching that game with a 10-foot pole. The Texas team that does interest me is the one coached by Jimbo Fisher that plays against New Mexico. And with Bobby Petrino as his offensive coordinator and Jim Chaney in the fold and 31 guys no longer with the program, I think there was some addition by subtraction. I'm going to take the Aggies, and I'm going to lay a really big number here, 38 points against New Mexico. I think that Texas A&M is going to be looking for a statement win, and I think they're going to be looking to put up some big numbers. So give me the Aggies in my lock of the week and give New Mexico 38 points. Send those Lobo fans howling home disappointed.
So an embarrassing home loss last week for New Mexico State in the season opener against UMass, and Mike's got a big number being hung on the Lobos here. Rough start to the season for the land of enchantment, if we are to believe that. Jeff, how about for you? You got any picks from the rest of the board here?
Sure, I got a few. Let me see. I like interesting matchup for me is the one this weekend. I believe Colorado and TCU. That's the national finalists from a year ago. That line is only 21 points. I saw right there. I'm gonna definitely take TCU to cover that one, even though I think Travis Hunter will have at least 2 touchdowns in that game.
Tell you what, Jeff, I'll give you a deal.
Bet is I look for Cash Jones with over 75 yards.
I'll give you a deal on TCU. I'll give them to you at 20.5. How about that? Does that sound fair? 20.5 on TCU.
That's what I found them on.
Yeah,
20.5.
I'll give you 20.5 there on that, and then give us your Cash Jones one more time.
Cash Jones, all-purpose, over 75 yards against UT Martin.
So there you go from Jeff Sintel. How about for you, Connor? How about some best bets for the upcoming weekend?
And BA, you were quick there with that TCU 20.5 line. I'd also like to point out as well, BA and I went 6 for 6 in terms of picks this week. I am terrified by that fact and absolutely hate it. Got a couple of games out there. Mike threw out Texas Rice, the famous why do we go to the moon game. Kind of like Rice in that game there. Mike Bloomgren doing some good things there. Other game I like, Old Dominion plus 16 against Virginia Tech. I don't think this is a good Virginia Tech team. Wyoming, a 2-touchdown home underdog against Texas Tech. That's an interesting game. But my number one best bet, and it's a stinky line, Penn State against West Virginia. I think this West Virginia team is the worst team in the Big 12. I think this is a really talented Penn State team. I know they're breaking in a new quarterback in Drew Allar, but give me Penn State here minus 20.5 as my best bet of the week.
So I did not realize that Connor and I had the same picks this week, so I guess one of us is doomed to fail, or perhaps we're both doomed to fail. I'm certainly Connor would probably wish he was unhitched for me on a couple of those. And as far as like expanding the board here a little bit, maybe this is a little bit of week 1 jitters. I'm actually not firing on quite as much this week as I'd like to. I do have 2 games that I do like. One of these, I mentioned earlier, Virginia, kind of worst Power 5 team in the country. Another team that's in contention for that, Stanford. Stanford also has to travel across the Pacific Ocean to Oahu to take on Hawaii, who, by the way, a week ago not only got a game under its belt in terms of, kind of getting its sea legs underneath it a little bit, best improvement week 1 to week 2. You've heard that before, but they also showed you this team that was playing pretty well at the end of last year under Timmy Chang, the coach, clearly a far different team than the one that got blasted by like 50-something points. Vanderbilt week 0 a year ago. Hawaii just a 3.5-point home underdog to Stanford. You could talk me into saying Hawaii wins the game outright, but I'll certainly take the 3.5 points and be happy to do that. I like the Rainbow Warriors a lot. This is a Friday game, so if you're watching the show, you got to move quick to get in on it. But I like Hawaii plus 3.5 against Stanford. I like that a good bit. The other game that I like, and this one's down the board a little bit, but hear me out on this. I like Texas San Antonio, UTSA, on the road at Houston. I think that Dana Holgorsen, I would say, the Cougars coach here, among the most likely coaches to be fired by the end of the season. This is the kind of game that gets you fired. The Roadrunners are a favorite here of 1.5, but I'm going to take a money line minus 122 to get super deep. They're like minus 110 as a 1.5 point favorite. So I'm going to kind of take a minus 122 just to win the game. So I'll take a money line minus 122. I do like them on the road against Houston. That's my other best bet. Texas San Antonio money line, Hawaii plus 3.5. Those are my best bets. I understand, Dari, you've got at least one game that you love here on the upcoming slate, so I will stop talking and yield the floor to you.
Absolutely love it. Lock of the year. Back up the Brinks truck. Put it all out there. If you want to make some money, this is the game. East Carolina.
I knew you were going to say that.
On the road in the big house. I will be there. ECU is going to cover this number all day long. Right now it's sitting at 36. I got in at 37.5. There is no way ECU loses anywhere near to that. ECU is a solid team. They're going to put up some points against this Michigan defense. I don't think I've ever remembered a line where ECU has been an underdog by 30-plus points.
Wow. So Jim Harbaugh's not coaching too, right?
It doesn't matter who's coaching. I wish he was coaching so he doesn't have an excuse.
So strong take there from Dari Payrow. I had a feeling we might hear about the Pirates there in that spot. So leaving the Rowdy Dowdy, going up to Ann Arbor, and it sounds like Dari's on his way up there too. So Dari, you have fun up there in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we will look forward to following you on those picks all weekend long. And to the rest of you who've joined us here for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews this week, best of luck with your own picks there as well. Enjoy the Georgia Bulldogs against the Skyhawks of Tennessee Martin and the rest of the action for Labor Day weekend as the college football 2023 season is underway. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.